Thanks for coming. Lovely to see everyone. So my name's Gaia, and I'm going to talk about the Anthropocene and this extraordinary time that we're living in. So, ever since humans first emerged onto the wild savannah, we have modified our environment, burning down forests, cutting ribbons of rice fields into mountains, shifting rivers, hunting to vanishment some of the biggest animals, taming many others, digging rocks and mud to grow magnificent cities where living structures once stood. But the changes that humans have made in recent decades have been on such a scale that they have altered our world beyond anything it's experienced in 4.5 billion years. Our influence is no longer confined just to a local or regional area. It's global and so profound that we're moving into a new era, a new age that geologists are now calling the Anthropocene. That means the age of humans. Millions of years from now, a stripe in the accumulated layers of rock will reveal our human fingerprint, just as we can see evidence of the dinosaurs in the rocks of the Jurassic or the explosion of life that marks the Cambrian. Our influence will show up as changes to the chemistry of the oceans, the loss of forests, the damming of rivers, the retreat of glaciers. The fossil records will show the extinctions of various animals and the abundance of domesticates. The chemical fingerprint of the artificial materials that we're leaving everywhere, such as aluminium drinks cans or plastic bags. It will show up the footprint of a single project like a mine in northern Canada that already moves twice as much earth every year that all the rivers in the world move in that same time. In the Anthropocene, humanity has become a geophysical force on a par with the asteroids, the earth-shattering asteroids and the planet-cloaking volcanoes that have defined past eras. Earth is now a human planet. We decide whether a forest stands or is raised, whether pandas survive or go extinct, how and where a river flows, even the temperature of the atmosphere we decide. We are now the most numerous big animal on Earth, and the next in line are the animals that we've bred to feed and serve us. 4/10 of the planet's ice-free land surface is now used to grow our food. 3/4 of the world's fresh water is now controlled by us. It's an extraordinary time. In the tropics, coral reefs are disappearing. Ice is melting at the poles. The oceans are emptying of fish because of us. Entire islands are vanishing under rising seas, just as naked new land is appearing in the Arctic. No part of this planet is now untouched by human influence. We've transcended the natural cycles, altered the physical, biological and chemical processes of our planet. Humans have the power to heat the planet further or cool it right down, to eliminate species or engineer entirely new ones. We have invented robots to be our slaves, computers to extend our minds. We have an ecosystem of networks with which to communicate. We've shifted our own evolutionary pathway with medical advances that save those who would naturally die in infancy. We have surmounted the limitations that restrict other animals by creating artificial environments and external sources of energy. A 72-year-old man now has the same chance of dying as a 30-year-old caveman. We are supernatural. We can fly without wings. We can dive without gills. We can survive killer diseases and be resuscitated after death. We are the only species to have left our planet and visited our moon. The realization that we wield such planetary power requires quite an extraordinary shift in perception. fundamentally toppling the scientific and cultural and religious philosophies that have defined our place in the world. Up until the Middle Ages, man was considered to be at the centre of the universe. Then came Nicholas Copernicus in the 16th century, who put our planet as just another one revolving around our sun. By the 19th century, Charles Darwin had reduced humans to just another species, a twig on the grand tree of life. But now the paradigm has shifted again. We are no longer just another species. Humans have become masters of our world and integral to the destiny of life on Earth. And what about the impacts of our changed planet on us? After all, we've evolved and adapted to a life in the Holocene. That's the epoch that we're supposed to be living in. The changes have occurred very rapidly. In changing Earth, we have been able to live longer and in greater comfort and in greater numbers than ever before. However, for now at least, humans are still of nature. We evolved on this living planet. We're made of cells. We breathe air. We drink water. We eat protein. We rely on the planet to provide our everything. All our materials, our fuels, our clothes, our building materials, to clean our air, recycle our water, manage our waste. Our growing population and the way that we live in this new human age are making us more demanding than ever on the planet's resources and processes, reducing their ability to meet our needs. How will we deal with the consequences of this Anthropocene that we've created? We've always altered ecosystems to serve our needs, and presumably we will continue to do so. We've improved the planet for our survival in a number of ways. One way is that we have indefinitely postponed the next ice age, for example. But we have also made it worse for us. Some of these negative consequences we can overcome through technological advances or migration or adaptation. Others we will need to reverse, and still others we're going to have to learn to live with. And while science may be able to identify the biophysical issues we face, it cannot tell us how to react. That is for society to decide. Humans are no longer just another animal. We have specific human needs. And these are expected to be achieved through development, these human rights. And these include things like access to sanitation, to electricity, even to the internet now. Delivering social justice and protecting the environment are closely linked. How the poor get rich will strongly shape the Anthropocene for the decades to come. The enormous impacts that we are having on our living planet in the Anthropocene are a direct consequence of the immense social change that we're undergoing. Changes to how we live as a species. We now support a massive global population, more than 7 billion already. But we've not simply multiplied the number of small hunter-gatherer communities. More than half of the world's people now live in cities. And these are giant artificial constructs which act as factories consuming the planet's resources, the planet's plants, animals, water and mineral resources. Humanity now operates on an industrial scale. And it has needs, currently 18 terawatts at any time of energy, 9 trillion cubic meters of water a year. Humanity has become a superorganism. The intelligence, creativity and sociability of this superorganism is down to the accumulation of human brains, including those from the past who have left a cultural and intellectual legacy. Also the artificial minds of our technological inventions, such as computer programs or information libraries like Wikipedia. Humanity is a global network of civilizations with a stream of knowledge already being channeled for our protection. But the self-awareness that comes with recognizing our planetary power also demands that we question our new role. Are we just another part of nature doing what nature does, reproducing to the limits of our environmental capacity, after which we'll suffer a population crash, a bit like that famous bacterial experiment? Or are we the first species capable of self-determination, able to modulate our natural urges, our impacts on our environment, such that we can maintain habitability into the decades to come? And what of our relationship to the rest of the biosphere? Should we treat it as every other species does, as an exploitable resource to be plundered mercilessly? Or does our new global power imbue us with a sense of responsibility over the rest of the natural world? A few years ago, I left London and set off on a journey to explore the globe at the beginning of this new human age, meeting the pioneers who are negotiating a development path through the complexity of our shared biosphere. As humanity faces its biggest challenge in 10,000 years, I met remarkable people living in an extraordinary time. And as a species, we're incredibly diverse, and the Anthropocene is affecting us all in different ways. And I'm going to show you some slides. I'm just going to do this. This one, is it?
I think it might work.
Oh, okay.
That'll do.
Yeah?
Is that all right?
Okay, so so this is a typical picture of a savanna. This is the sorts of environment that we started making our own as the ice retreated around 11,000 years ago. These are people in the Hadzabe tribe in East Africa and Tanzania. And this is interesting because these are hunter-gatherers, and humans. This is our background. We were hunter-gatherers before we started changing the planet in a really noticeable way. This is how we behaved, and it's the most ancient form of feeding ourselves. And really, as we enter the Anthropocene, we're facing certain crises. We're facing the problem, for example, of how on earth we're going to feed ourselves. So it's worth looking at how people around the planet are already feeding themselves, and looking at how sustainable that is for our future. Is this going to support a big population? So as you can see, almost all the resources that they use, they make themselves. Oh, thank you. I might wait till afterwards for that, but thank you. Gin, brilliant. This guy's got baboon feathers would be something. Baboon fur, but he's got animal skins on him. They shoot the prey. They hunt on foot, shoot the prey. These are the youth and men of the tribe. The women are doing more of the gathering, etc. It's a very diverse diet because it's got protein, it's got vegetables, it's got all sorts in it. So in that respect, it's good. But they do some trade with other local tribes. For example, for the metal arrowheads, they trade with a local tribe for that. And they have a very small population. But this is a disappearing way of life, and it's disappearing because it doesn't fit into our modern world anymore. Land is valuable. Land is used for something. So, for example, we've decided that lions are valuable to us, and we want to conserve them. So we make a big reserve. No one's allowed to hunt them, apart from American dentists. And so these people have got an ever-shrinking area to hunt in. Farmland encroaches on it. And hunter-gathering lifestyles, they're not sedentary. They don't sit in one small area. The people roam around as the animals roam around. That's how it works. Roaming populations everywhere, from nomads in the desert to these people in the African savannah, are they're facing extinction. This way of life is facing extinction. It doesn't fit into the way that we're living. So I went hunting with these people. That's a squirrel that we managed to get after several hours. There's not very much to eat, not very big catches. This is not a sustainable way for 9 billion by 2050 people to live. Not at all. But it's a valuable way of life because human diversity is fascinating and interesting, and it's a shame, I think, that this way of life is pretty much doomed. It's an inefficient way of hunting for large populations, which is one of the reasons we moved from hunter-gathering. Their life is very much, it involves moving around a little bit. It involves very small tribes. They don't live in traditional houses. They don't have a settled lifestyle that most people in the Anthropocene are not living this lifestyle anymore. So if we're looking to how we're going to feed ourselves in the Anthropocene, this is not the way to feed a lot of people, and that's something we learnt several thousand years ago. And this is the neighbouring tribe, the Datonga people, and they are already living. They live in a farming lifestyle. This is their house. They have a settled house. Once you have a settlement, that means that you can take part in school programs, medical programs. Healthcare is better. All those sorts of all the things that we value in society. It's easier to access if you're living in a fixed house. They farm onions, and farming itself actually it can be restrictive. It can restrict your calories. It can restrict your diet's diversity. So the only way it works in terms of making sure that you're not malnourished is that if you can trade with other people so that you're not eating onions all day, for example. But it also allows you to store food to eat at a later time. It means that some people can do the farming while other people are doing something else. So there's a lot of advantages to agriculture. But doing this, farming, already started changing the landscape noticeably. So through farming, obviously, we created our own plants. None of the crops that we eat occur naturally. They've all been bred in this way. So we've created our own species in the Anthropocene, and we've created our own landscapes, a landscape of monoculture, or we've slashed and burnt in order to plant there. We've changed irrigation channels. We've changed the species that live on the species that we plant. So farming's done a lot. So this is one of the advantages, obviously, of farming, of agriculture, is that the useful products that we make can be stored, can be shared, can be traded, can be used in various different ways. We can brew them, so we have a brewing industry, bread. And one piece of land can then feed a lot more people. So although it can be more susceptible to catastrophes, to risks, so hunter-gatherers are much more flexible. They can move with the species. If your whole field gets attacked by pests or disease, you're a bit screwed, really. So there are disadvantages, but nevertheless, I think as a species, that it's uncontroversial to say we are moving towards agriculture. What sort of agriculture? Well, probably more towards the sort of agriculture that we practice in the West than in Africa. And that means scaling it up. That means intensive, scaled-up agriculture to feed all these people. And there's advantages and disadvantages to that. But looking at the reality, this is Uganda now. This is how a lot of people farm in the world. So when we talk about feeding lots of people, we talk about intensifying agriculture. This is what people are facing. This is, a cart that then you have to pay money, you have to save up, pay money, or get into debt to borrow some cows to drive your cart. So this is the problem. This is one of the problems with the very low yields that African farmers get as opposed to here. And when we think about how are we going to feed all these people in the Anthropocene, the things we're looking at is mechanisation. We're looking at proper equipment. We're looking at access to fertilisers. We're looking at improvements in roads, because the roads are so terrible in Africa. That getting your food to market is near impossible in a lot of cases. So 40% globally in the developing world, 40% of food is wasted between crop and market. In the rich world, we have the other problem where around 40% is lost through wastage, after it's been prepared. So we need proper storage, refrigeration, better roads, cheap enough fuel so that crops can get there. When I was in Uganda, for example, in the west of the country, there was floods, but it was flooded, but the crops were really, really bountiful. But people were destroying them in the field because they had a glut of a harvest, and they couldn't sell it. They couldn't sell their bananas or whatever. They couldn't sell them there. Northeast of the country, a drought that was so severe that America was sending, US aid was flying in food parcels. How ridiculous that they couldn't just get it across the one country. But these are the real problems, and Uganda is not a country with completely, no governance or something. It's functioning in most ways, in a way. Anyway, so these are the sorts of things we need to think about. So yes, high yield monocultures. That's what we have at the moment. So in the Anthropocene, we're facing new challenges. We're facing unstable climate. We're facing the fact that we use just a handful of crops to feed the world, pretty much. And this is a very risky strategy. As the climate changes, we need something that's going to help with drought. We're going to need something that if a disease wipes out your crops, that's not the end of the world. So there are now programs to look at natural diversity. So instead of just using a few different strains of each crop, people are trying now slightly improving, using different types of crop, but also different varieties of the same crop. This is just a bit of natural variety in sweet corn, in maize. This is in Bolivia. There are seed banks, so the famous one at Svalbard, but there are seed banks everywhere. But I don't think the world has really woken up to the fact. Oh God, sorry, I keep doing that. I don't think the world has woken up to the problem that we face with just using a few select seeds. Not just because it only attracts certain types of insects and so on, but we're losing a little bit of diversity that would anyway naturally evolve, and evolution could help us here, as well as the scientists who are working very hard to breed pest-resistant, disease-resistant, fungal-resistant crops and so on. we need to look at different ways of making food, basically, and we need to think about the different climates. What's happening in the Anthropocene is we're losing land. Okay, so already 40% of the world's land is used to grow our food, and these are basically the best lands. Those are already the best lands. We've taken those and we've used them, but we're facing a massive problem with soil depletion, soil erosion. Desertification is a huge problem with the climate changing. Water evaporates much faster. Precipitation is much less reliable, and most precipitation anyway happens over the oceans. And salty soils, the aquifers all being drained too fast. We need to try and find new ways of new places to grow food. And at the moment, what's happening, of course, is that rainforest is being cut down for that purpose. But wouldn't it be better if we think of other ways of doing that? One way is intensifying agriculture, making it much more efficient. Other ways, this is Bangladesh. This is an experimental plot, actually, but they're actual plots that farmers are using for floating gardens. So, if you happen to live somewhere which is very flood prone, or you can also do it on paddy fields that are when they're drowned. It's quite useful, and they have it in Burma as well. Other options are using deserts in creative ways, so building greenhouses which keep the moisture inside, and there's some really interesting designs as well on that. People are looking at growing food in cities, and that's not actually as crazy as it seems, especially with the increase in slums. There's actually quite a lot of little plots that can be used and can make a difference to people, especially when it comes to vitamins. But we're also going to have to create our own specifically designed crops. This is a Uganda again. This is he's a geneticist, and he's growing peanuts that are resistant to a mold, which has been a huge problem in East Africa. And peanuts are really useful because they're oily, and so they contain a lot of fat as well as protein. So they're quite high calorific. They tolerate drought really well. They're great. And when we think about the Anthropocene as well, we're thinking about feeding all these people. We're not thinking of necessarily, emaciated 80s portrayals of Ethiopians. It's not just about calories. We're also thinking now about nutrition, so malnourishment. So, for example, protein. We need to get protein, especially into babies and children, because it's really important for brain growth, and not just for the individual to reach their potential, but for society. If your society is made up of people who haven't got enough protein for their brain growth, that's not great, is it? And micronutrients. So there's a project you might know of, golden rice, which is to put vitamin A in rice. And vitamin A is vital because one of the leading causes of blindness in the developing world is actually lack of vitamin A. So it's a solvable problem. But there's a project to put it in peanuts, which is much more sensible because vitamin A dissolves in fat, and peanuts are very fatty, unlike rice. So, I think in the next decade or so, we're going to see a much more rounded and balanced nutrition from the few foods that we eat, hopefully. But protein is a real issue. How are we going to get protein? At the moment, we get it from meat. A lot of it's from meat, from cows, pigs, or whatever. That's one of the least efficient ways of producing protein. It's very damaging for the environment. Raises it produces a lot of carbon dioxide, methane, and other green. It's bad for global warming, but it's also bad in terms of if you're chopping down rainforest to grow a very inefficient form of protein. It's not great. And if it was just America eating beef, that's fine. But if everybody in the world is going to start eating beef, not fine. So other more efficient ways of making protein are being looked at. Insects are fantastic form of protein, and they're eaten already around the world. But they're great for lots of reasons, and one of them is that you can grow them in backyards. So women can do it as a side project. They just have a strip lighting and a gutter. The locusts or whatever are attracted to that, and they drown in the water. And every time we think about a solution to a problem in the Anthropocene, we've got to think, is it socially appropriate as well? Because the Anthropocene, when I talk about the Anthropocene and the problems we're facing, I'm talking about it from a human perspective. What does it mean for us, for society? And how is it going to make our human lives better? And how we spend our lives, what we do with our lives is really important, of course. So if it's something that you can do locally for yourself, for your family, that's obviously very valuable. And not just for human feed, but for animal feed as well, for the people who are still eating beef, or fish farms, insects they're the way to go. Water. We're running out of water, running out of fresh water. We're not running out of water. We've got the oceans, obviously, but we're running out of fresh water. And this is obviously a real problem for agriculture, for drinking, for everything. And around the world, people are looking at different strategies. And one of the things they're looking at is what did we do in the past before we kind of grew lazy and just went for the technological fix? This is India. This is in the Thar Desert. And India has been relying on electric pumps. They're powered by kerosene or diesel or whatever. And they are just sucking the groundwater at a completely unsustainable rate. And there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of salty soils. It's a huge problem. It's not sustainable. It's a problem that's not going to go away. The groundwater aquifers are not being replenished in a lot of cases, and farmers are facing starvation, and many of them are committing suicide. This is the old way of doing it. These are very beautiful. They look like temples, but these are underground water storage, step wells, they're called. And you go down and the water is stored underground, so it's less likely to evaporate. But all around the world, people are clearing out now these ancient wells and these ancient aquifers and getting better use out of them. A lot of them have been designed so they're replenished after the monsoon rains, because they were built in the place where the groundwater naturally sort of goes. So that's one way to look at it. So looking to the past at how we can get water. It's not going to be enough, though. We need infrastructure. We need national and international efforts to infrastructure to produce it. This is again in the Thar Desert, on the border of India and Pakistan. This is a canal that's being built, and it's a lifeline. People walk for hours to get water from these places. We need to start thinking about a much broader program of infrastructure, of reservoir building. We need to improve our stored capacity for water, and I don't think it's being done enough around the world. I think we're facing some real problems. Desalination plants are already starting to come into effect, but we need to think about desalination. We need to think about, what's happening to all the salt that we get from the desalination. Or is it just going to be dumped, or is it going to be used or stored usefully? How is the desalination being powered? Is it being powered through solar power, or is it being powered through oil? Because this is the time where we're building these prototypes of something that's going to be rolled out everywhere soon. So it would be great if that thought was going in now. Around the world, people are also looking at local efforts. This is Ladakh in the Himalayas, in the corner of India, Pakistan, and China. A very, very beautiful region of Buddhist, Tibetan people. Well, they're Ladakhi, but it's a high-altitude desert, so it very rarely rains or snows, as you can see. The people that live there rely on glaciers, basically, and they grow barley, and the glaciers are melting. So this is a huge problem, and the people who can no longer water their fields are moving, migrating, and drought's a massive cause of migration. They all, they go to Delhi or Mumbai, the big slums. They are made up of people, often from the countryside, who can't make a living there anymore and have moved there. And that breaks down the society here. It means that the Ladakhi language, will it still be spoken? Will that culture carry on? Are there villages just of old people now? There are options. In one village called Stakmo, the problem was, as I've described, and the glacier had melted, which fed the village, which irrigated all the crops. And a retired railway engineer in his 70s came up with a solution to the problem, an ingenious solution, and he created an artificial glacier. So this is how he did it. So he, with the help of the villagers, he gathered rocks. They just had rudimentary tools, and some of them were just bone or some spades and so on. And they got together and they dug and levelled a plain, whether in the shadow of the mountain. They built up rocky channels, culverts, gates, and so on. This is like his 8th one, I think. So it's getting a little bit more practiced at it. And it traps the precipitation when it does fall in the winter months, when the sun can't rise above the mountain, so that area is cast in shadow and it's cold. And that's what he gets in the winter. A glacier, an artificial glacier. And it lasts until the sun gets high enough around the end of March, April, which is exactly the time when they're sowing the seeds in the valley, and then you get the trickle of irrigation. So it all works beautifully. It's fantastic. The villagers are very happy. People are not moving away. In fact, they're coming back. This is the harvest that results from that artificial glacier. And one of the positives of global warming is that instead of just being able to plant barley now, they can plant a whole range of different varieties. So they get 2 harvests a year, and they're planting things, apricots, wheat, even tomatoes and so on. I mean, it's all great. I mean, I don't know how long this is going to last, obviously, because soon even an artificial glacier is not going to last there for very long. But this is one of the farmers there with her cows, and the cows breed with the yak, so they have these half-bred animals that can live at higher altitude. And this is a community that has benefited from a very localised solution to the water shortage, a local geoengineering solution, essentially. And it's local, but it could be mirrored elsewhere. I mean, he's built more than a dozen so far, but it's not being used as nearly as widely. This is the guy that did it, Chawang Norfel. He doesn't have modern tools to plan these things more efficiently. The government isn't getting involved to see where it could work, but actually it's completely transformed that village and a few villages around it. And each time he does it, it transforms the village, and it gives people a sense of future, and it allows them a few years to make plans and to diversify what they're going to do, and rather than having to be forced out by the fourth failed harvest, they can have a strategy to cope with it. So this is another attempt at an artificial glacier. This is in Peru, and these guys were these are alpaca farmers, and they had the same problem. Their mountain had a glacier. The glacier fed the river, and I know you said moisturised. It wet the alpaca pastures, so that's alpaca could live, everything fine. Another high altitude desert, when the glacier disappeared, there's no precipitation to replace it, people are moving away, in this case to Lima, to the slums there. So the idea here was to literally paint the mountain white in the hope that it will increase the reflectivity. The white increases the reflectivity, and any precipitation that lands will freeze because it will be so cold, and rather than on the black rock. This is a little bit crazy. That's how much they've painted so far. They've got to paint all that whole black rock white. I know, it seems completely crazy. Apparently it lasts now. The ice lasts till 10 a.m. So, I don't know if it always lasts till 10 a.m. These are the sorts of desperate measures that people are taking. And, are we going to paint the whole of the Andean chain white? Unlikely. And but what are we going to do? We really do have to start thinking about what we are going to do, because actually this is a huge problem. The Andes is experiencing some of the highest rates of glacial melt in the world, and it's got a big population that rely on it completely, not to mention, parts of the Amazon rainforest rely on glacial melt as well, the rivers, hydro. So, this is completely insane, and yet people are doing it. So, in Lima, in the slums in Lima, they're trying another experiment to get water. So these are fog nets, because on the Pacific coast it's incredibly foggy, even though it never rains. In Lima, it's the second biggest desert city in the world after Cairo. And people come there with nothing. They've come from their rural fields where they've been hit by drought, and they've had to move. So they come here. They've got no water. Their plan is a really clever long-term solution. So they're trapping the fog. The fog runs down there, and actually, it's audible. It gushes down. It's really loud when you're standing there. You feel like you're next to a waterfall. It's incredible. It doesn't look like it, but that net is catching so much fog. It comes down onto that corrugated steel. It comes down, and they're putting it in tanks at the moment, which they're using. They're using it for drinking water and stuff. But their plan is to irrigate saplings of trees, so that the trees will do what the fog net's doing. It will create its own ecosystem, which will be completely different and produce its own water. And there's a fascinating story which I probably don't have time to tell you about now. Well, I'll tell you really quickly because it is really cool. But there's an island called Ascension Island in the Atlantic, miles away from anywhere. I don't know if you know this story about Green Mountain. And the British had a problem with Napoleon, as you may know. And when they got him, they put him on an island, and the Navy wanted to keep watch over this situation that they had with Napoleon. And so they thought, okay, Ascension Island, we'll have a station there, which was all great, except there was no vegetation there. There was nothing. What on earth were the sailors supposed to eat? So to solve that problem, going around the world at the time were some rather smart people, Charles Darwin, also Hooke, going around, and they thought, this is a brilliant idea. I know. What about if we take some of the stuff that we've got hanging around in Kew, and just try it experimentally on this island, see what grows. So the Botanic Institute at Kew just sent random stuff. So, everything from bananas to palm to whatever. So this island has now got all kinds of, it's the sort of forest that you wouldn't see anywhere else on the world except perhaps in Kew. So this was very successful. This mountain grew. It was got the Green Mountain, and it created its own ecosystem because that's what forests do. The humidity... the humidity then runs down, you get water courses, and the sailors could make their little vegetable gardens grow very nicely. It all worked really well. So this is what they're planning to do there, the same thing. They're going to grow a forest, and apparently before in pre-Columbian times, before the Spanish came and chopped all the forests down, there was a forest there. So the hope is that this sand dune is going to become a forest. It's going to produce its own water. It's going to be a completely different ecosystem. So that's pretty fabulous, and it could work in other places. It's being tried in other places. Okay. I haven't. Well, anyway, I haven't done this. So in the Anthropocene, this new world, we are operating differently I would say as a superorganism. We are all connected in different ways. We're having a combined impact on our planet, but we're also we're a very social species, and we communicate, and our communication is key to how we made this Anthropocene in the first place, but also, I think, to how we can solve our problems, how we can adapt, how we can adapt our planet to our own benefit, perhaps more, and how we can adapt ourselves. And this photo, I just think, shows the power of the mobile phone. I mean, when I was little, there were no mobile phones, and now, since they arrived, they have been adopted everywhere so quickly. There are more mobile phones than people on the planet, and they are transforming lives. It is a transformative technology. This is a Maasai warrior. He's got really, I don't even know where he keeps that phone. So. It means that farmers can check the market price. They can find out what the experts are predicting will be the best types of seed to sow, when they should harvest, what the weather's going to be, where to get information on various things. It means healthcare. It means all sorts of things. All around the world, people have taken on this in really ingenious ways. In Kenya, actually, where this is, has taken this remarkably, where they have mobile money systems, which has completely transformed the way society operates in a lot of ways. And it means that people who would maybe be more marginalised, who don't have a good credit rating or whatever, most people don't have bank accounts. So women or very poor people, they have access now to a system where they can take part in commerce. It's really empowering. So humans, we have an external source of energy. We made fire to start with. We've only progressed there. But the external energy source that we've been using most recently, coal, oil, fossil fuels, are damaging. They're warming the planet. They're changing the planet. And yet a lot of people around the world don't even have access to electricity yet. And that is a fundamental right, I think. People really need electricity. They need to be able to see after it gets dark at 6 o'clock. They need to, anyway. This is on the banks of Lake Turkana in northern Kenya, near Ethiopia. And it's an incredible place. These are people's houses, these huts. they have solar panels on their roof, which is something I don't have, to charge their mobile phones, because their mobile phones are so important. This is an area that is being transformed right now. It's the nomadic tribes, herdsmen that live around here, have been living a very similar. This is the cradle of humanity. You know, this is a Rift Valley. This is where Takanaboy was found. This is where we came from. This is where humans came from, and it's undergoing this tremendous transformation. In the next 10 years, it will be unrecognizable. There are hydro dams being built just further north in Ethiopia that are going to transform it. They're going to reduce the flow in this one sort of oasis in this desert, this vast desert. But they're also building Africa's biggest wind farm here. They're building a big solar plant. They've just found oil. They've also just found loads of water underground. So really interesting things are happening here. What it means for these incredible people who live here, I don't know. I think they're going to experience an incredibly fast pace of change, which is something that we've experienced as a globe really quickly, but this one area is really typifies that. But really, this idea of how we're going to get electricity to the people that don't have it, and at the same time not tie us into even more frightening warming, is something that people are thinking about, but I don't think we're there yet in terms of solving this problem. For various reasons. So the other thing we need to think about is the mineral resources we use. This is Bolivia. This is a silver mine in Bolivia, and this is a worker who lives there, and it's a horrible, horrible job. Silver prized above all else, you know, it's what the Spanish Empire was built on. It's what the whole architecture of Europe's evolution and ascendance was formed basically on the silver out of this mine. Silver's now not as important perhaps as some of the rare earth elements that power our mobile phones that are found in China, or some of the other minerals and that we mine, from oil to tungsten or whatever. So we need to think about the resources we use and why we use them, and what we're going to do in society to change that. At the moment, we're still very much set in a Holocene mindset of plentiful resources, of low human population, of very stable climate. But things have changed. We're in the Anthropocene now, and we need to rethink everything we do, and that includes product design. You know, why not design for something to be easily dismantled and recycled, and the pieces used again? Why not design for a circular economy right at the outset? So yes, this is Bolivia, which was really at the receiving end of the Spanish occupation because of its silver. And this is also Bolivia, and this is the world's biggest lithium reserves. And lithium is used in batteries, and batteries storing energy is one of the big issues we have with renewables. And it's lithium batteries are used. They're very lightweight. They're used in electric cars. This could be the new silver rush. You see, for Bolivia, could get rich on its lithium. So, you know, it's almost arbitrary what we decide is valuable. You know, silver was valuable. Now maybe it's lithium. But when we think about what's valuable, we need to think about it in the long term more than we are doing at the moment. So, for example, maybe graphene is the next thing. Graphene is made of carbon, very, very, very abundant. So that's great. But how you make it, very energy intensive, so not great. Anyway, we're creating a new geology with the Anthropocene. And this picture, I think, really, this is Panama now. I was just standing on the edge of the Panama Canal when I saw this huge monster going through. And the Panama Canal is really an example of what we are as a species. We have divided basically North and South America in a way that only tectonics would do naturally. You know, we've put water between two continents. It's quite awesome. And united two oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific. And we've done it to allow trade, to allow globalization. And this is a big symbol of globalization, the container ship. So the invention of containers really sped up all the changes that have taken place in the last 50, 60 years. This great acceleration in everything from car ownership to population to beef eating, you know, everything. They're actually widening the canal at the moment. So what about our relationship to nature? I mean, this is a really big issue that I don't think our society has really got a grip of at the moment. We really need to have conversations about what our relationship to nature is, because at the moment we're at the beginning of what many scientists think is the sixth biggest mass extinction in the history of our planet. You know, the others were caused by asteroids, volcanic eruption. You know, this is caused by us in various ways. These are Asian lions which once roamed all the way as far as Italy. They're now in this tiny, very sad park in the west of India. As you can see, they're not the healthiest specimens, and there's very few left, you know, and that's going to be the end of this lion. But it's a much broader extinction. We need to talk about, you know, what should we save? There are various projects looking at this. Should we save something just because it's evolutionarily very rare or important in that way? Or should we, you know, is it more important to save pandas or pollinators like bees? And important to whom? And we're not having that conversation. And how? How should we save them? You know, should we put them? Should we put lemurs on a Caribbean island like Richard Branson? That's his solution to the problem of lemurs being very badly at risk at Madagascar. Should we put elephants in Australia? That's another. You know, should we ban humans from certain areas, or should we embrace the fact that we are also a species and that it's great to see these things? How are we going to interact with animals in the future? Are we going to have these Pleistocene parks which kind of recreate this thing that existed early on in our history? Or, you know, we're not having these conversations, and meanwhile a lot of extraordinarily diverse places are going extinct. Perhaps the first ecosystem to go extinct will be coral reefs, and if you're a diver like I am, that's incredibly sad. This is by Anthropocene lion. This is an African lion cub who's really, really excited because he's got a great new toy. And it really shows, you know, the closeness. This is the most kind of wild, you know, you grow up knowing about lions, these very wild animals, but really nothing's wild anymore. We created the parks they live in. The Serengeti is a human creation. You know, it's managed by people. It's, you know, it wouldn't occur naturally at all like that. But without it, perhaps there wouldn't be lions. So, anyway, our relationship to nature is something that's, I think, is one of the great questions of the Anthropocene, what we're going to do. Right, so what about our habitat? We're mainly living in cities now. By 2050, more than 3/4 of us will live in cities. And what sort of cities are we living in? You know, this is Dhaka in Bangladesh, and it's completely crazy. I've never seen so many smashed up buses and cars in my life. Look, they literally push each other out of the way. And this is how a lot of people are making that big migration. This is the biggest migration humanity has known. This great urbanisation that's going on at the moment, and this is how people live. They don't. But cities are interesting because, are they going to be the salvation of nature, for nature in the Anthropocene? Because everybody's going to be in the city, therefore rural areas can rewild. Maybe that's what's going to happen. But at the same time, we're getting, we live in cities, but we rely, we get our food from the countryside still. We get our all our resources from there. And this is how people are living. This is a slum in the south of Bangladesh. He's pointing out to me where the water comes periodically. His house is just continually flooded. And everyone's living in one room on the water. They're sitting on the roof when it's completely flooded. And it's not healthy. It's not sustainable. And it's because no one's really. We're not talking about this. We're not doing proper planning for cities. These problems are all solvable. They're not never before confronted issues. But the way governments respond to this urban migration differs around the world, and a lot of people, these people are stateless. Basically, they don't have access to water or sanitation because they're essentially squatting on the outskirts of the city, and yet this is how cities form. This is how London formed. This is a place which is starting to get it slightly better, more right. This is a favela, which is a slum in Rio. And, this is people just build their houses and so on. But they've taken a new approach here, and it's a copy, actually, of what's happening in Colombia. They've taken a new approach where they say, OK, you are part of our city. We will embrace the fact that our city has expanded, and we will put services there. We will connect everybody. So they've come up with some creative solutions. They have gondola transport between the poor and the richer areas. So people are more connected. Services are there. People can access help. They're not paying the most for their water as they were before. They're not paying protection rackets because they can't actually approach the police or anything for help. Things are improving once society becomes more integrated in that way. I think there's a lot to learn from that. But again, this is happening after the event. Wouldn't it be great if there was planning before? If people thought, our cities are going to expand. How are we going to do this? How should we plan this? That's the end. That's my book. Thanks very much for listening to my ramblings.
Well done. I wonder if you get some light on there. Thank you very much indeed. So I had a lot of questions come, and I'm sure other people do. One thing about the cities, I think you talk in your book about how the Chinese are approaching new cities and how they are actually beginning to solve that problem, and they're planning them ahead of time rather than waiting for them to happen. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, well, that's actually a very interesting difference. So I think what you're referring to is there are some Chinese cities which are literally ghost cities. They've been built, especially in the north, and that's to do with speculation, basically, property speculation. And so there are entire cities built with shopping malls and everything, and yet nobody lives there. It's absolutely bizarre. Maybe they will, maybe they will live there. It's an experiment. That'd be really interesting. But what's also happening is in China is a massive urbanisation thing. But the Chinese government is looking at this in a more interesting. Are you thinking of the eco-cities as well? Yeah. So there's some interesting. There's one eco-city which in Tianjin, which I thought was really interesting. They've built a city, but it's very inclusive. So It's not just for people who live in Shanghai or whatever and want their little eco crash pad. It's very much including, local families in very livable circumstances. So it's built around cycle pathways and trees. This is something quite rare. If you've been to Beijing, you literally you can't see your hand in front of your face. It's disgusting. You can't. It stings your eyes. And they know that. They know that. Of course, they're living there. Nobody wants to live in that situation. And what they're having there is this rapid urbanisation expansion. And people are moving to these cities. And it's being done mostly badly. Mostly people in Beijing are being put up in new blocks that have been built with shoddy concrete, badly designed, and then they collapse periodically and then have to be rebuilt. It's not great. China's a developing nation.
So planning has problems too.
Planning has problems too. People are trying to solve this in different ways. The ecosystem city example is fantastic, but it's one city, and there have been many eco-cities that have been eco-cities on paper which have failed. This is interesting because it's actually not on paper. It really is. Yeah. They really are doing it.
Right. Let me open up to some questions. One minute.
Given the fact
Is that on?
No, I can hear you anyway.
Given the fact that human nature and all these things that are happening, how long do you give the Anthropocene?
Before the post-Anthropocene.
I don't know. We're just at the start of this process. We're just at the start. Already the changes that we've made globally are so significant that they will be visible, geologists say, for millions of years. But whether the stripe in the rock will be paper thin or whether it will be a chunky, big Anthropocene signature, I don't know. It very much depends, I think, on what happens in the next few decades, which is extraordinary. I really think what we do in the next 30, 40 years will really determine how long and how many of us will survive, and I think that definitely we will survive, but in what circumstances and how much comfort, and whether it's just a handful of rich people doing well and everyone else not, I don't know. What do you think?
I'm afraid I don't think we're going to last very long. I think a lot of the things that you've mentioned are a bit like shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. I don't think we'll be around in 1,000 years' time. I don't think humanity as we know it is going to be around in 1,000 years' time.
Maybe.
Gosh, I'd like a show of hands on that one. Who thinks we'll be around I don't know, more or less as we are in 1,000 years? And who thinks so? And who thinks not? Yes. Well, I was talking to Noah the other day, and I know who are coming with me. I think there was slightly more. I think that was 60-40, with 60% saying that we won't be around in this way in 1,000 years' time. Another question in the back there. John.
Hi, I'm trying without the microphone. You can hear me.
I can, yeah.
I enjoyed your book very much. What you did tonight was touch on various subjects. I think the thing that struck me the most was that you actually went to these villages all over the world and you met scientists who were dealing with their problems in a rational way. So my question is, if you tomorrow woke up as president of Imperial College, how would you change the curriculum?
Well, I think that's interesting. I think that I really do believe that in the Anthropocene we do need to change the way our institutes work and function. And I think this, science is becoming more and more specialised because it's becoming more. We're finding out a lot more about it than we did know, and it's necessarily specialised. But at the same time, science and scientists operate within society, as I'm sure everybody is aware. But that is becoming actually more important now, I think, and I really think that the way we're taught, the way our institutions function, everything needs to happen with the mindset that we are living in the Anthropocene. So everything, especially practical, especially engineering, and there are lots of engineers at Imperial, we need to think not just, is this the best material for the job, but, how well does it function in an Anthropocene setting? Is it easy to get hold of? Who will be producing it? What society will be producing it? What communities? How will it be moved through society? How will it be used? How long will it be used for? How easily will it be to dismantle? How will it work under the changed conditions that we are living in, which is, more monsoonal conditions, say, we're already starting to experience in the southeast of Britain, for example. These are different from how, but then drought, Is it suitable in the Anthropocene? Or we need to, our institutions are very Victorian, and they need to change. We also need to change, I think, much more in that we represent society more. It's not good enough for the people who speak about these things and the people that are in charge of deciding these decisions all to be, white men. That's not appropriate anymore. We're living in a world where we need to come together as a diverse and global community and talk about these problems and solve them together. And if the scientists at Imperial talk to the people whose applications, who will be using their applications or be interacting with them in some way or receive the consequences of them, if there was more interaction in that way, I think that we would be much more Anthropocene ready.
In the future, how did you? Thank you.
Yes, that's working.
How did you get the inspiration for this, and then how did you go about practically finding this knowledge? And is there funding available for this kind of thing? How did you find the funding?
Well, I worked as I went around. So I'm a journalist. So I sold articles, wrote them as I was going, radio pieces. So sometimes stay in one place for a while, waiting for the money to come, or writing the articles. Yeah, so that's the funding. I can't remember the rest of the question. Sorry.
Just where you got the inspiration for this.
The inspiration. So I was the news editor at Nature. So I was receiving a lot of the latest papers across my desk that had been published, and they were all talking about various aspects of global change. And I realised that there was one thread linking them all, and that was us. We were the ones creating all this global change, and I thought that was really interesting. And so I wanted to find out, what the people on the forefront of experiencing these changes, and that's actually the poor people generally. What they were doing about it, because it was already happening to them. Were they just sitting there thinking, oh shit, I hope that someone at Imperial finds a way of solving this problem? Or were they actually going out and solving it themselves? And in most cases they were, because they had to, and yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And also, obviously, the scientists in the West, we're coming up with ideas from everywhere, of course.
And finding the various, the chaps who are painting the rocks in Peru, and the chap who was making a glacier. Did you have those? Had they crossed your desk and you think, I ought to put that in my bag when I'm going to go there? Or did you actually went round, sort of hear about something or read something in a local newspaper?
It was much more as I was going round. Someone would talk about something, or I'd find something out, or someone would tell me. I would tell people what I'm doing and what I'm interested in, and someone would say, oh yes, you must go and see so and so, or you must try. So, there's no substitute for being out there.
So you can do it too?
Yes,
That's
of
what
course.
It sounds like.
Hi.
Yes.
Okay, so based on what you've seen, sometimes I wonder about what is the bigger threat for the environment and the well-being of humankind? Is it the sort of Western world with all our new inventions and high energy consumption, or is it the masses of poor people who go for cheap materials, dirty solutions, the latest complaint, the Chinese coal power stations, and just kind of trying to survive from day to day, not because they want intention, but because they don't know any better, and that's what they can get their hands on?
Well, I mean, it's not a competition. I think we're all doing our bit to make things more awkward for us in the next coming years. But at the same time, the solutions are coming from everywhere. I mean, we just got agreement in Paris, amazingly. It wasn't the best agreement. It didn't mean that everything's going to change, but it was really, really significant. It meant that governments around the world are saying this is a big problem, and it's a problem caused by us, and we need to do something about it, and there is a temperature that we should try and limit ourselves to. And just that in itself is an enormous step, I think. Around the world, yes, people are trying to make a better life for themselves, just as we all do. But some of the, China is going all out for incredible wind power, solar power. It's trying everything from CCS to different types of sequestration of carbon dioxide. That globally, we're all, I think, we know what the problem is and we know how to solve it. I don't think we're doing it fast enough, for sure. But it's not. I don't think we should be discouraged by that.
Yes, question there. And then I think we'll close it.
There's an elephant in this room, and that's us. You talk about being rescued by scientists or governments, but isn't it really down to every single one of us to cut our consumption of this planet to a level which is actually manageable? And shouldn't we be actually really pursuing that on an individual level, not on a government level?
Well, yes, of course, we should all do our bit. But governments aren't these kind of big behemoths that exist independently. Governments are representations of us. They represent us. We are the government, essentially. I mean, I didn't personally vote for this particular government, but at the same time, we live in a democracy. If our government is pursuing policies that are not ones that we necessarily should be pursuing, it's because of us. So basically, the question really is, are we doing enough? And no, we're not doing enough. I'm personally not doing enough, and probably none of us are. But I think what we need to do is look at the way the world is changing, and look at what we need to do to make it more livable. And there are various ways of doing that. And there are lots of things that we can't foresee that completely change things. Like who would have foreseen, for example, that we could have teleconferences rather than fly people around?
Flying, yeah.
There are so many different ways of improving the situation that I don't think we should beat ourselves up about it, but I think we should be much more self-aware about what we're doing and make conscious choices.
I think let's hope that, in thanking you, let's hope that at least in 100 years' time they won't look at that expression and say, what the hell were they? What would they mean, elephants?
It'd be nice if there wasn't.
What a funny sort of expression, that it's dead as a dodo. Let's hope that they continue and we all begin to we find the solutions that you so graphically in the book explain. It seems to me that when I read the book, it struck me how complex this problem is. It's just not just global warming here. It's not a problem of food there. It seems a huge, interconnected mess of problems. And I think that what Gaia's done is to articulate that in this book. And it's worth a read just to see the complexity and the strange way in which humanity is solving it at all sorts of levels. And very movingly, when you get to the last chapter, she projects forward and has it written by your son, 30 years' time, 50 years' time, as to what his life might be like in one of the megacities that undoubtedly are being created. And I really would thank you very much for taking your time out from nature and from your commitments here and making that journey. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.